think that this particular chair will actually make me go. We can try. See how it makes me spin?
Yeah.
Sweet.
So it's making me spin
Yep.
because I'm forcing it to change.
Nice.
That is so interesting.
What makes that happen?
So, well, there's technical terms, but basically, angular momentum is another way to measure how things move, right? So there's regular momentum, which is straight line motion. Angular momentum is a way to measure how things are rotating. And it turns out that when something starts rotating, it likes to keep rotating in that direction unless it experiences a torque. So it turns out that gravity is providing a torque. But that torque doesn't just make it flop over. It just doesn't go... The torque, oddly enough, makes it spin around this way. So for example, in World War I, right, here's the thing. You're flying an airplane, right? And watch what happens. If I decide I want to go land, you would think I would want to tilt it down, right?
Yeah.
Watch what happens when I tilt it down. It goes left.
Oh.
Right? If you want it to go left, if I try to go left, it tilts up. It's very, very strange. Same thing with helicopter pilots.
Do we know why it's doing that?
Oh, absolutely. Because the torque works in mysterious ways. Well, it's not mysterious ways. It's just different than what you would have thought. I'm a helicopter pilot. I want to tilt it down so I can fly forward. If I try to tilt it down, it turns me left. So in World War I, they crashed all the time on takeoffs and landings because it seemed so contradictory to what you'd think you want to do. And what they did is, by World War II, is they reduced the weight of the propellers. So the propellers were a lot less.
Yeah.
So the effect was a lot less and way less people crashing. So, cool.
Physics.
Paha-Weizix, I pronounce it. Yeah.
So do we want to get started?
I'm ready.
Okay. So my first question, how did you decide that you wanted to pursue a career in science and more specifically physics?
Well, when I was an undergrad, I wanted to be a math major. And I was, taking a lot of math classes, and I took a physics class because you had to take a science class. And I realized that all the math was there, plus all the cool stuff. And I just thought, well, this is awesome. So then it was fun. You just got to play with stuff and blow stuff up and apologize for blowing stuff up and then blow stuff up some more. And then I realized that I could get this job, which was hard work. I mean, it was a long time to get to a job like this. But man, that's what I wanted. So that's how.
So what other experiences do you have in physics?
Well, when I was in graduate school, it was really interesting because I was working on a really expensive project. So the laser that I worked on cost about $100,000. And when you work on a laser that costs that much, you can't really think about how you might translate that over to a school like this, right? So I had a choice, like to keep working on the really high-end stuff or do some cheaper stuff. And for a while, I did the high-end stuff. We would shoot a red laser in, and X-rays would come out, which no one thought that would happen, right? And so we were trying to figure out ways to sneak up on atoms, so that instead of having a laser on all the time, I would just have the laser blink for an incredibly short amount of time, about a millionth of a billionth of a second. And in that time, you can sneak up on it, and you can rip it apart, and then you can slam it back together again and make X-rays. And so I've done a lot of that stuff, and then we patented, actually, the equipment that I used to do it. And so I still make money on the patent. I make about $500 a year on that. So.
Wow. So how did you get involved in the Mall of America event with promoting the flipping of the classroom?
Well, it's interesting. So they never talked to me about the flipping of the classroom at all. It was just, hey, do you want to do a show with Bill Nye? Right? And so Bill was going to be here for their event, which they didn't tell me much about. They said, hey, Bill's going to be here. We really want someone to do a science demo show. Can you participate? And I wasn't sure how the branding was going to work because I knew it was the Sophia.org place, right? So I kicked it up to the marketing people here at Hamlin, and I said, hey, I'm happy to do the show, but it's going to say Sophia.org all over the place. Are you okay with that? And they're like, so they contacted Sophia and found out I could wear my Hamlin shirt, and I could say the word Hamlin a whole bunch of times, and we could have some Hamlin, banners, and they're like, sure, it sounds awesome, it's going to be great, it's Bill Nye. And so then I started to watch how it was described on the web about it being flipped class, which I thought was kind of funny because it's what I've been doing for years around here, right? So I started teaching a flipped class approach. Oh boy, I just saw those guys graduate. They came back to the show. They must have graduated in 2009 or 2008, and it was when they were sophomores when I started doing it. So I've been doing it for a long time now. And I've slowly started to change the way that I teach, all centered around not lecture at home and homework in class. No. The preciousness of class time. That's when they get to spend an hour and a half with me. What the heck should we do? If I'm going to read them the textbook, what a waste of time, right? And so, well, what should I do? And then what needs to be done, therefore, outside of class? So I've been doing that for years. In fact, I give talks all around the country about flipped class for physics teaching.
Okay. How do you personally define flipping the classroom? Like, what do you do in your...
Sure. So the most recent incarnation that I'm doing right now, but I also did in the Sound and Music course last fall. Let's say that I'm wondering how sound is generated and how sound propagates, right? And that's what we're going to talk about in class on the next day. All I say to my students is, what specifically causes the sound when you snap? Most people don't know, right? They say, oh, it's a snap, right? They think it's this rubbing right here. It is not the rubbing, right? It's when this finger lands right there and it whacks it really hard. So to snap, you just have to hold off the pressure, and then let it go. And that's the sound you make. So I simply said to my students, what makes the sound when it snaps? They kicked it around. They came to class. I said, okay, what makes the sound when you snap? And all kinds of different ideas that I started to write on the board. And we started kicking around, well, is that a sound? Is it a vibration? Because they kind of thought vibration had to do with it. And we kicked around a whole lot of ideas about what sound was and how it propagated. At the end of the class then, I'd say, okay, what more resources do you need? They're like, we still don't quite understand. Could you get some high-speed video of this finger landing right there so we could see the vibrations? Could you tell us what the difference is between hitting it here and hitting it there? So they asked for additional resources that they could consume at home, right? Videos, textbook chapters, these kinds of things. And so I make screencasts or videos all the time in response to them. So I call it flipping the flip, right? Mm-hmm. It's not, here's a bunch of stuff, watch it ahead of time and come. No. I want you to come with a pretty open mind when you come, having simply thought about snapping your finger. Then we're going to work like crazy to try to figure out what is going on. Then we're going to figure out what additional resources you need and have me not read to you in class, but simply just make some resources for you so you can go off and explore it some more.
Sweet.
So that's how I do it.
So what classes are you teaching at Hamlin right now?
Boy, right now it's an easy semester. I'm teaching physical optics, which is Phys 3520, and the associated lab. And then I co-teach a lab for modern physics, which is Phys 30. Actually, that's 3520. The other one's 3250. Whatever. They're 3,000 level physics classes. I had a pretty heavy semester in the fall, and so it's a pretty easy semester this semester.
Nice. Okay, so getting back to the Mall of America event, how did you choose the experiments that you were conducting on stage, and which one was your favorite?
So when I first started here in the fall of 2000, the chair at the time said to me, hey, wouldn't it be awesome if we had a show we could take to schools? And I was like, yeah! And so that is exactly the conversation we had for 12 months. We'd pass each other in the hallway. We should totally do a show for elementary schoolers. Yeah! Right? So for a year this goes on. So then he comes to me, it's August of 2001. Right? So, and he approaches me and said, oh, we should do a show. And I said, yeah. And he said, no, I'm serious this time. We have to. And I said, whoa, we're getting serious? What do you mean getting serious? And he said, well, I knew that we needed some motivation to build some apparatus. So I went to the person who runs the faculty meetings. We have faculty meetings every month. And I have us scheduled for the first 5 minutes of every faculty meeting for the whole year. He said, so let's start building some stuff. And let me tell you, an excellent practice audience for elementary schoolers are CLA faculty members. Anyways, it was actually pretty fun to go. So we would every month, we'd let 3 weeks go by and say, oh my God, we have to build something, right? And so we would build, we did 9 meetings that year. We built 9 things. So for example, that was the 9/11 year, right? So 9/11 happened. And my buddy Ted, he couldn't concentrate that day, right? We were all so flustered by what was happening. We're all watching the TVs. He disappeared. I didn't find out what happened to him until later. He said he went downstairs and he pounded 2,000 nails. And that's how we got the nail bed that I still use. And it was made on 9/11, which is actually really cool. So, long answer to your question, the things that I did on stage with Bill were actually created 14 years ago and have been slowly augmented as we do it. Then I do between 5 and 20 shows a year, depending on how many elementary schools contact me. It's a requirement that physics majors have to do a show with me before they graduate. So I often have students coming with me to do the shows. So when Bill and I contacted me, Well, Bill Nye didn't contact me. When Sophia contacted me, they said, well, just bring your stuff. We'll talk to Bill. So I showed up Sunday morning with my stuff. He's like, this looks awesome! And, we just started grabbing things. He didn't like my garbage can. He thought that I use a garbage can to make a smoke ring. The vortex of science! And he's like, oh, that's ugly. We should build a new one. And I'm looking at my watch. It's Sunday, right? The show's at 1 o'clock. This is 10:30 in the morning. He said, we should build a new one. I'm like, what do you mean build a new one? He grabs a sheet of paper and he's like, well, let's see here. Let's draw a cross-section. He's drawing these hash marks. I'm like, what is that? Oh, that's the cross-section of the thing. I'm like, okay. And then he draws this other thing. I'm like, no, there's no cross-section there. We cut a hole there. You're right. So he grabs another sheet of paper and he's going crazy. So then he looks up and he says, this is the Mall of America, right? We can buy everything here. We need a 30-gallon garbage can. We need a lid. We need half-inch steel screws. And we need, all this stuff. And, of course, Bill Nye, so they say yes to everything. They don't have the guts to tell him that the Mall of America doesn't have a hardware store. So they send somebody to Home Depot, and they come back. It shows up at 11:45, and I have to build this thing. Right? I'm nervous because this is the biggest show I've ever done. This is 5,000 people. I had to build it from scratch before the show.
Wow.
So, anyways, super long story short, my favorite one was the nail bed by far, because getting on the nail bed was just awesome, and having him stand on my chest, it was just... I'm like, I can't believe Bill Nye is standing on my chest. And I cut my finger. I don't know if you heard about that, but I cut my finger. You can still see it on the camera there, right on the tip. On a nail. And before he swung the sledgehammer, he decided to get me a Band-Aid. So Bill Nye put a Band-Aid on my finger in front of 5,000 people.
Nice.
Awesome.
Do you think you could further explain the nail bed?
You bet.
Do you have it?
I have it, yeah.
Can you show us?
Yeah, you want me to just go get it?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right.